On April 20th, 2010, the Deepwater Horizon disaster changed the lives of millions living near the Gulf of Mexico, as well as the scientists who responded to the crisis. These are some of their stories, intimate portraits of research, innovation, discovery. Welcome, I'm Jim McNamee, editor of Dispatches from the Gulf, a series of documentaries, short videos, and podcasts. Today we're going to hear a highlight from a fascinating and much longer interview between Joan Michelson of Green Connections Radio and Marilyn Weiner, executive producer of the Emmy Award-winning documentary Dispatches from the Gulf. We urge you to listen to the entire interview by going to greenconnectionsradio.com or follow the link on our newsletter.
Welcome to Green Connections Radio, where we help you live green, work green, and earn green. I'm Joan Michelson. I watched Dispatches from the Gulf, and it's incredibly compelling and inspiring. And it tells in real time the story of how the scientists sought to measure and address the impact of the oil spill. At least that's how I understand it. We're going to see what Marilyn tells us about it. So welcome to Green Connections Radio, Marilyn.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you so much. So tell us about the origin of the film. What was the purpose of it?
So, it's like everything else. When you start to do something, you have in mind one thing, and what you end up doing is something entirely different. We did want to tell the story about what happened in the Gulf on April 10th. I think it was April 20th, 2010. But there had been a lot of films, plus television, nonstop television coverage, telling you about the accident and the tragedy of 11 people dying and this huge amount of oil spewing. But that was already known. So we said, okay, is there anything good that's coming out of this? Is there anything that we need to know and that will help us understand about science, about oil production, et cetera? And we decided that as we were interviewing scientists, we realized that, number one, this was probably the biggest collaboration of scientists ever funded at one time. I mean, $500 million was put aside to do studies over a period of 10 years. I can't think of anything else that even comes close to that, but there may be. And then as we were digging deeper and we met these scientists, the work they were doing was so fascinating. We said, this is a story. It's really about science, and it's about the scientific process. And it's what it is about science that people are so tempted to go into and study and devote their lives sometimes on small things, sometimes on larger things. But it was a real eye-opener because it wasn't about just being in a laboratory. It wasn't about looking just through a microscope. It was phenomenal. And what was particularly interesting is that things were actually being learned, things that can be helpful in future oil spills. And it was also the joy of that the people expressed in the work they were doing. And the other thing that we learned is that often scientists, they work together in their labs. There is some collaboration, but they've never had collaboration across universities, across states, across countries even. And that being part of that was very exciting to a lot of the people that we met.
So how did you build the relationships with these people so that you didn't get in the way of the work they were doing and they didn't feel like you were not as important because you're not a scientist kind of thing? I mean, how did that part of it work?
That's interesting. We never actually got in, that never really became an issue. First of all, I mean, you've been around a while, so we learned how to go into a situation, figure out we knew some of the people that we would be working with. We met them usually in advance, so we were able to establish a relationship, but not always did we meet them in advance. But we're good at usually getting people to cooperate with us, because the first thing we usually say is, look, we're not 60 Minutes. We're not here to do an investigative piece. I mean, I think 60 Minutes is great, but that's not what this was all about. So once we established what our goal was, which was basically to show the audiences, general audiences, school kids, museum audiences, and anybody, just what they were doing and how exciting it was not such a difficult task, really.
So when they realized you were there to tell their story, not to look for flaws in their investigation.
Correct.
They didn't, it became a non-adversarial. They realized it wasn't an adversarial relationship.
Right. Yes, exactly. And I mean, we had one or two people that were a little bit hesitant and a little bit skeptical that they would come out looking so good. And of course, when they saw the film, they said, "Can you come back?
That's
tell you." So it was very satisfying from all perspectives.
Thank you again for joining us for this week's episode of Green Connections Radio, where we help you live green, work green, and earn green. Find us on iTunes, TuneIn, and Stitcher, and at greenconnectionsradio.com, on Twitter at Joan Michelson, and on Facebook. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Joan Michelson. See you next time. Bye-bye now.
Today, thousands of scientists, oceanographers, chemists, engineers, biologists are all working together to develop newer and better ways to understand and ease the impact of oil spills. To learn more about their work, visit our webpage at dispatchesfromthegulf.com. Funding for this podcast was provided by a grant by the Gulf of Mexico Research Initiative. And thanks for listening.